Welcome to Empowered, Mind Body Inspiration. The mind is the map to wholeness, wellness, health. The heart is the key to genius and inspiration. Join me and my guests as we explore how to release and rewire into who you truly are, unique, whole, and empowered. Please like, share, and subscribe. Spiral up, spiral out. Hi, everyone. Today we have Chris Natzke on Empowered. Chris is an 8th degree Black Belt Master, instructor, and former Taekwondo champion. As a life leadership coach, keynote speaker, and Amazon #1 best-selling author, he transforms lives through his unique Black Belt leadership program. He's going to talk to us about the 3 keys to protection and conscious persistence, and I'm sure a whole lot more. Let's spiral up with Chris. Welcome, Chris, to Empowered. So good to have you.
So great to be here, Jane. Thanks so much for having me.
So I love your story of being a 10-year-old and watching Kung Fu and insisting that your mom take you for martial art lessons, right?
Yeah.
And then it felt like coming home. Just tell us about that.
Well, it's so interesting. Thanks so much for asking that. The one thing that I would preface is that at that time, at least I think it was 1973, the martial arts in the United States was not what it is today. It wasn't where you see a martial arts school on every corner. It was very, very unique, if you will. In fact, I remember my mom explaining to her friends one time at a dinner party, yeah, Chris, he does this thing called Taekwondo. And they said, well, what's that? And she said, well, I think it's kind of like ballet, but faster. And the reason she said that is I would always go around the house kicking and holding on to, things for balance or whatever. And when you're 10 years old, you're not really too keen about being called a ballerina. At least I wasn't. Not there's anything wrong with that, right? But no, I watched the TV show Kung Fu, which was quite popular in the States at that time. It was the Kwai Chang Caine, the Shaolin monk walking across the American desert. And he would go into these little towns and the bad guys would try to beat him up and he'd, flawlessly take care of him using his Kung Fu. And I was mesmerized by it and I begged my mom to let me go. And the first time I went into one of those classes, the very first time, I saw these people doing these movements and I was absolutely mesmerized. And as you said, I literally felt like I came home. But that's not really where the origin story ends. In my case, 3 years after that, I met a man that would change my life forever. And he's still my instructor to this day. His name is Grandmaster J.K. Lee. He lives in Milwaukee. I grew up in Wisconsin. And he had recently moved from South Korea. He had hardly a dime in his pocket, but he had this burning desire to transform lives through martial arts. And so one of the first times I was in his class, I was seated in the back of the room. My legs were spread wide. I was stretching out, getting ready for the day. And he walked onto the mat with this amazing, powerful presence. And he begins surveying all the students. And pretty soon I realized he's staring directly at me. And before I could get up, before I could move a muscle, he'd come over and he sat down in front of me. And he put his right foot on the inside of one of my legs, his left foot on the inside of the other. He grabbed the ends of my belt. And with one push-pull, he split me out to 180 degrees. And as I always shared, I learned 2 important life lessons that day. Number 1 is anyone can do the splits one time. But the other thing I learned is he looked at me deep in the eyes and he said to me in his broken English, he said, I will make you a champion. I will make you a champion. Now, when you're 13, you think about medals and trophies and blah, 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 blah. But what I realized is he was really planting a seed for me. He had really recognized something in me and he claimed it for me, which I didn't really have as I was growing up to that degree. And he was also talking about being a champion in life. It wasn't just about the ring, and fighting. It was about how you show up as a human being. So I'm incredibly indebted to both of those experiences because both were life-changing for me.
Right? But you tend to draw these people to you when you really dream it, don't you?
Absolutely.
And your comment about it felt like coming home, was that like a reincarnation memory or?
It could have been. I've thought about a lot of that. And I think, many times when people think about martial arts, they think of being the warrior. And I'm sure that in past lifetimes, I've probably played that role. I think we all have. But what I really think where the connection was being a teacher, because that's what martial arts came for me. I wasn't like I necessarily loved fighting. I just loved the beauty of it. I loved what it stood for, the essence. And from a very early age, I loved teaching. And in fact, that, it's basically the same work I'm doing today is teaching. And I'm using those principles when I go out and do keynotes and work with coaching clients, et cetera. But it's interesting. That's what was the anchor for me, was being able to express and help people find their greatness through that experience as well.
Right. And yeah, so I want to hear all about that. Now, I was a ballroom dancer, so I don't know a lot about martial arts. I know there's some similarity in digging deep and, learning the basics and, mastering that before you move on.
Mm.
So just tell us all about, you did Taekwondo and you got how many black belts?
Well, I'm an eighth degree black belt.
Okay. So eighth degree black belt. See?
And I was honored in 1999. I competed nationally, and I was a United States national Taekwondo champion as well.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, boy, how do I explain martial arts? I mean, the one thing is that, I always tell my students this is many of the times we think about martial arts, we think about discipline, and it does take a tremendous amount of discipline. But it's about a discipline about where you just keep showing up. We have a saying in martial arts is that a black belt is a white belt that never quit. So, I've had the honor of teaching tens of thousands of students. I've got, probably around 12 to 1,500 students that have attained their black belt with me. And I can think of only two, Jane, that when they first started had all of the skills necessary to be a black belt: focus, concentration, flexibility, speed, et cetera. Only two, and they eventually got their black belt. But the others, they didn't have those skills, but they just kept showing up. They kept showing up, and pretty soon they made that breakthrough through that element that was holding them back, whatever it was, and a whole new world opened up to them. And so, I love, I shared with you before we started recording how I have such a tremendous admiration for dancers, as you said, because it's all about that control of the body. And in martial arts, we certainly have that. There's also, as there is in any sport, right, is this dedication to, consistently showing up. I think where martial arts is great is, and particularly when I'm teaching children, is we're also integrating those with life skills and values, right? And so they become intertwined in a really beautiful way. And I've had a number of students that have come to me now, adults, saying, man, when you said this, or, when I learned this, this was life-changing for me. And then I knew I did my job. That's when I knew I did my job.
Right. And to teach them that, to carry that on in life, Oh.
Well, because I knew, when I first started teaching, that most of the people that I taught, most of the children and adults, weren't going to stay with it for their entire lives. I'm very unique that I've done that. And that's okay, because we all have other interests and journeys to go by. But if I could teach them certain things that would stay with them a lifetime, right, from that experience, then I did my job.
Yeah. I danced when I was younger, right through university, and then took up ballroom dancing and went to a championship, Canadian champ level. But it was that showing up every day. And even when other people would say, why are you still doing this? You've got a job, why do you want to do this? And it was just the passion of that, chipping away at it. And it would just continually get better. And then when I had twins, I had to give all that up. But it's that showing up, that every time you commit to something, you do what you said you were going to do. And I think that's what sport teaches us. Yeah.
Totally. And what's so important about that, Jane, is it's not only telling someone else we're going to show up and doing it, which is important. It's telling ourselves we're going to show up.
Yeah.
And then we begin to trust ourselves more. And I actually wrote in one of my books years ago about this idea that freedom comes through discipline. Right. So many times people think, oh, I just want to be free, do whatever I want to do. But the idea is that when you're very disciplined about your health and let's say your nutrition, then your health is positively impacted. You have the freedom later in your life to be able to move your body freely. If you're disciplined with how you manage your money, now you have the freedom to buy the things you want to buy, right? And I talked about, particularly when I was training for national championships, there were days I woke up, I did not want to train. Trust me, there were
Yeah.
days I didn't want to. But I had a teacher tell me years ago, what does feeling like it have anything to do with it? Right? You made the commitment to yourself, so be there. And many times, those times when I went and did it anyway, almost every time, they were some of my best training sessions, because I found something about myself, I think, and even physically felt good about it. And then afterwards felt great that I showed up, even though I didn't want to.
Yeah. And once you show up, your heart gets engaged, and then it's like it just carries on, but you have to
Carries
show
on.
up. Yeah.
Exactly. So, it's our minds that play those tricks on us, right? Oh, stay in bed today. Don't go do this. Oh, just, hang around, watch TV. If it's like, no, I made a commitment to myself. And when we do that, then we kind of build that muscle up. And now I think that many times, particularly as when we become adults, we've created that pattern either positively or negatively, and it continues to play through in our lives. And, the difference between the people that are really doing well and having happy, fulfilled lives and those that aren't is very, very slim at the very beginning. But it's like a plane that's off track. Like I often tell my students, if we took off from Denver, Colorado, and we were going to be flying to Honolulu, Hawaii, and the pilot was off 1 degree south, right? It would start to continue to move and move and move and move further and further that he went. And by the time they landed, it would be in Auckland, New Zealand, right? It would be that big of a difference. But it's the small things done over time that create those massive results.
Right. And I think it's the same with fitness, health, and like if I get off track by 3 pounds, 5 pounds, you got to get back on your right, your path that you planned on being 20 years ago
And
or whenever you
that's
started.
life.
Yeah.
We're never going to be totally on pace. I
Yeah.
think using another pilot analogy, I have a good friend of mine who's a pilot, and he says that 99% of the time when he's flying that plane, they're off course and it's constantly readjusting.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And you can't be perfect. Like you're
No,
going to have to readjust. So
absolutely.
I kind of want to hear more about this teacher of yours.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me just some of your favorite moments with him and some of the beautiful things he taught you.
Yeah. Well, this one. So what I want you, I'll tell one story, and then there's another one that's very, very personal to me. But this, I think, will help in the mind's eye of your listeners. When the Karate Kid movies came out in 1981, the original Karate Kids with Pat Morita as Mr. Miyagi. When I watched that movie as maybe I guess I was a senior in high school, freshman in college, I literally cried when I watched it because Mr. Miyagi reminded me so much of my teacher. So I want to give you that context, but I'll give you an amazing, this is one of the most impactful times of my life. And it was also one of the most devastating. When I was 17 years old, I had a brother who tragically drowned in a drowning accident. So I was away at a football camp, and he was out at the beach and the city beach. And, Canada, you probably have a lot of lakes too. I grew up in Wisconsin, lots of lakes. And so he was there, jumped off the high dive and never came up. So I came back home to this immense tragedy. And one of the things that we did is when we had the mass to honor my brother, we had a procession at the offertory where my cousins brought little memorabilia that would remind them of my brother. And the last person to come up was my instructor, Grandmaster Lee, who was carrying a black belt. Now, my brother Danny was not yet a black belt. He was one of my students, which teaching your own brother has its own unique set of challenges, but I won't go there now. But the idea of the black belt, one of the meanings of it is the imperviousness to darkness. It's being able to lean in and have that courage, right? So we had Grandmaster Lee present that. And I was the one at the lectern during the service that was talking about what each one of the trinkets, what they signified. And when Grandmaster Lee came up and he laid the black belt on my brother's coffin, I was at the lectern and I lost it. And I exited up until that point, I was Mr. Stoic, but as soon as I saw that, I lost it. And I went over to the side I was leaning over, a windowsill and sobbing. And all of a sudden I felt it was like the hand of God on my shoulder, this boom, this powerful grip on my shoulder that whipped me around. And it was Grandmaster Lee. And he reached and he grabbed me in his arms and hugged me. And we both sobbed there together. And I share that story. I don't share this story often, but to me, as a young man now growing into adulthood, that was for me the ultimate in showing strength and sensitivity and vulnerability all wrapped into one. Here was one of the men that I looked at as one of the most powerful on the planet, right? You know, a high-ranking black belt, but he was able to show that humanness and be there for me, you know, in a way that no one else could at that time. So that's one of my favorite stories that I get to share about him.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you can never forget that. And it's
No. And
just
you
the
had
feeling of
such an
connection.
impact with me, Jane,
Yeah.
as a martial arts teacher, and then as a father and whatever, is being able to make that balance. I think sometimes as men in particular, we kind of get caught up in trying to have this macho stoicism of it. And my God, he's a powerful man, but at the same time, he could show that sensitivity. And it really helped shape how I, chose to move forward in the world as well.
Right. And just showing up again, even though it's really difficult, and
Yeah.
being there for you, completely there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me more about what the black belt represents, about the darkness? I
Yeah.
find that intriguing
Yeah.
because we
Well,
have
it's
both.
the imperviousness to the darkness, meaning that
Okay.
you can't be defeated by the darkness, is what it necessarily means. And so, different martial arts systems have different belts. In the traditional Taekwondo system, there are 6 belts. We now, in a more modern version, have more. But the white belt signifies purity, right? It's like someone who has no knowledge of martial arts. It's like the new fallen snow. The yellow belt would signify it's like the grain of the earth starting to come up. The green is like the trees taking root and moving up higher. The blue belt is like the sky. So you're moving further and further up. The red represents the sun, and it also represents danger because now you're beginning to acquire skills that can be used in a dangerous manner if you're not able to control them. And the black belt is that combination of all of them. But again, the other one is like, having that courage inside of ourselves to not be afraid of the darkness, but to be able to move through the darkness, being our challenges, whatever are, the things that hold us back. The other thing that many people don't know, you asked me before about the ranks of black belt, because I get often asked that question, like, what is an 8th degree black belt from a second or whatever? And so basically, there are 9 degrees of black belt in the martial art of Taekwondo. Okay. And if you divide them by 3, your first 3 belts are basically the fighters, the warriors, right? 4th through 6th becomes the teacher, and 7th through 9th becomes the philosopher. So, I've been doing now martial arts. It'll be 48 years here in a couple months. I always joke, it's interesting that I started in the womb, how you can do that, right? But 48 years, I can't believe it's that long, but it's, as we move through, there's different, because we're looking at life from that perspective, there are now lessons we can share that we weren't able to do 10 years before, 20 years before. And so we become the philosophers, if you will.
Right. And it takes that long to truly understand, doesn't it?
Yeah. And the other thing too is, of course, do I move as well as physically as I did 10 years ago, 20 years ago? No, but I have life lessons that I can impart on others. I have students that do things much better than I can now, but that's okay because that's how we grow. I think the sign of a good teacher is being able to say, I've trained someone that can now do things that I never did before. And that's a great quality to have.
Right. So they're truly empowered.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
You had one more story about your teacher.
Yeah. Well, he was a huge fan of mine. And he was one of those people where, I was a high school footballer and a college football player. He was incredibly proud of me. And he was just always there supporting me. But he was also one who would challenge me, right? He would challenge me. And one of my other favorite stories with him is that um, his English was very poor. I'm just going to be very honest. But what was so interesting is I could always understand him. Other people just had no clue what he was saying, but because I was always right there. And our Saturday classes were always our most rigorous. But afterwards, he would sit behind his desk in his office, and a crowd of people would come, and he'd talk about Korean culture and martial art history, et cetera. And there was one day I was probably around 14, 15 years old. I'd already earned my junior black belt. I was a black belt at 14 after starting at 10. And a bunch of people around, and then they started to just peel off. And pretty soon it was just he and I, just the two of us. And you know how sometimes as teenagers, we ask questions that we already know the answers to, kind of as a means of testing the adults in our life? Well, I already knew the answer to this question, or so I thought. In the Japanese martial arts, they use the term sensei. You all probably have heard that as teacher. In Korean martial arts, we have a different term. It's called sabum nim. It means honored instructor. And it was just the two of us, and I so remember this. And we were talking. I said, "Sir, what does sabum nim mean?" Again, I already know the answer to this, Jane, right? I think. And he pauses for a moment, and then he looks at me and he stares at me like deeply in the eyes, and he says, "Sabum nim means father." Right in my heart, because I had grown up as a young man whose father was present, but had a very difficult time with alcoholism, right? So I wasn't getting the fathering that I really desired, When I look back at it now, it was all perfect, and I learned the lessons I needed to from that, but it was very difficult. And now I had this man that was making the statement for me. Now, to this day, I still don't believe he was trying to replace my father, but what he was saying is I played that role for you when you need it. And if you choose this path like that I'm on, you need to play that role for others as well. So it's one of my most precious memories of having him share that with me. And I mean, I look back at it now, that's, 45 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah. And now that you have so much understanding, what would father mean?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I've had the ability to play that fatherly role, if you will, not only to my own two boys who are now grown, but also to a number of students throughout the years. And I think what it means as a father is to be in a position of empathetic power, if you will. So you want to have a father be a source of strength that is there, that is role modeling at number one. But now strength doesn't mean that when adversity hits, that a father, again, is stoic and doesn't show emotion. Sometimes the greatest strength is struggling and being able to tell your students or your children, "I'm really struggling with this, but I'm going to continue to move through it." And then the other thing is I love this distinction, and I have to credit a good friend of mine for this. I didn't make this up. Her name is Kellyanne Zielinski, that a fatherly figure doesn't hold their children or their students accountable. They hold them capable. They see greatness in them, and they say, "Okay, we have this understanding," right? That's a master leader for me. "We have this understanding. This is what you want. This is what I see in you. That's the greatness we see. I'm holding you capable to that. I'm holding you to that standard because you've asked for that." That's what I think great fathers do.
Yeah. And teach to show up.
Show up, and they do it through example. And
Yeah.
they do it through conversation, and they do it sometimes when they break down themselves and they're brave enough to say, "You know what, I messed that one up." I think that that's one of the most powerful things we can do as leaders, is to be able to admit our mistakes. And so often in our cultures, we don't do that. I just think it's a really important thing.
Yeah. It shows such great strength, and
Right.
actually being able to admit where you went wrong and say, "Hey, I'm going to move through this."
Right. Yeah. One of my teachers, not in the martial arts world, but in the personal development world, said that 100% strength comes from 100% vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty powerful.
Very cool. Now, you were going to teach us about how to stay safe, or about safety, because that's another passion of yours.
Yeah, it is. It is. I've been, for probably over 25 years, I've been teaching a course that I was trained in, and then I've developed my own version of it that we call higher self-defense, HIGHER, higher self-defense. I have a business partner. Her name is Teresa Byrne. And she and I teach all over the state of Colorado this course, and it's based on the adrenal response. So to give you some FBI statistics in the United States, is 80% of women who are attacked by men that they know, right? And they may not know them intimately, but they know them at least in their periphery. They've had exposure to them. And about 85% of physical assault begins with verbal intimidation. So it's someone who is using their voice powerfully to intimidate you, to knock you off balance, et cetera. And then that's when they move into attack mode physically. But when people are able to understand that adrenal response and actually use it to their benefit, now they find a power that they didn't even know they had. And as we say, you turn your fear into fierce. And what happens is physiologically within us, we've all heard about the fight or flight response, right? So eons ago, the cavemen were walking, the saber-toothed tiger came, and he either had to fight the tiger or he had to run away to save his life. But what we don't realize is before that came freeze. It became freeze response. And you see it in nature all the time, and we see it in ourselves. And I joke with my students when I'm teaching this course, if you don't think you deal with that, have you ever had a situation where someone was maybe being verbally abusive or aggressive toward you? You couldn't say anything in the moment. Then you got in your car, you started driving home, and you said, I should have said this, or I would have said this. It's because our brain short circuits. And so what's so important is to know that we have power in our voice. And we teach in this class what we call the ABCs of self-defense. So the first A stands for awareness. Now, everyone would say you need to be aware of your environment, of course. You don't want to be walking down dark streets alone and going into bars, et cetera, that aren't safe. I mean, just to use an example. But more importantly, it's about awareness of ourselves, about the energy we're projecting out. And within our organization, we did a study of sex offenders that were in federal prisons. And they showed them pictures and videotape of specific people. And within a 97% accuracy rate, they picked the same people that they prey upon. Oh, wow. And it had nothing to do with long hair or low cut blouses or high heels. It had to do with people who, number one, wouldn't make eye contact. They walked with their shoulders down. They would have short steps, when they walk. They were projecting fear energetically. So one of the best things we can do outside of being aware of our environment is to stay alert in our environment. I mean, so many of us are on cell phones, right? As we're walking, stay alert, have your chin up, your shoulders back, walk confidently, because you see it in nature. If the bobcat is hungry, he's not going to go for the 8-point buck who's, majestically walking through the forest. He's going to go for that little animal that's, limping, right? Because he doesn't want a fight. He wants, he doesn't want the confrontation, right? He wants a victim. He doesn't want to fight. Mm-hmm. And so the best thing we can do is to first project that confidence. And then B stands for boundaries. And that's in this course, what we do is we actually teach people how to verbally protect themselves using their voice in a powerful manner to overcome a verbal attack. And then C stands for combatives. And that's where we, teach them specific striking movements. And I literally go in a big padded suit, and they actually do them on me to be able to show their proficiency. But I would say 80% of the course is helping people find their voice. Because when they do that, it impacts all other areas of their life. Their relationships at home, their relationships at work, et cetera. They just have a more assertive confidence about them.
Right? Because what's the first thing that happens if you're in a situation that someone's intimidating you or trying to control the situation? We lose our voice.
Lose our voice. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And the other thing, I'll just give you a little hint, is many times when people are looking to the protagonists, if you will, are looking to, they're basically, they do what they do is called an interview. So they'll start asking questions. Hey, how you doing? It'll start oftentimes very, very gently. Hey, how are you? Oh, nice to meet you. What's your name? What time is it? And they'll be doing the interview, and they'll be profiling people. what I always tell my students is that think about it this way. When you're in conversation, who is controlling the conversation? Well, it's that person who's asking the questions. So when we get the vibe that this person is maybe up to no good, that's when you stop and you ignore the questions. And you're like, no, stop. You're too close. Back away. And you don't get into trying, because many of us just want to be nice and answer the questions. And that's where we get ourselves in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can imagine, especially, young people that are still in the mode of pleasing.
Yes.
And they have their teachers and
yeah. It's interesting you're bringing that up because I'm literally this evening I'm looking at the clock here in a couple hours tonight. I'm going to be teaching a children's version of this course. So from 6 to 10 years old. And we focus on bullying and we focus on stranger abduction. And, one of the things we tell them is, there are good and bad strangers. Not every stranger is bad, but most bad strangers are not going to approach you aggressively. They're going to just try to become your friends and allow you to let your guard down. And what we teach them in there is to really listen to their intuition. Because when we listen to that, our bodies will give us we call it our own GPS system, right? Our bodies will tell us. You're nodding your head as we're doing this because I'm almost certain you've had a situation, Jane, where you've been in a place or been in a conversation you knew wasn't right. And we've all had those. And we've also dealt with them differently. Sometimes we were in our power and we said, no, I need to leave. And other times we didn't. We didn't listen to ourselves. And oftentimes they don't turn out well.
Yeah. I remember a time when I was a teenager, I went to a psychic by myself. And I remember thinking, ooh, this is weird. It's in an apartment building. And when very quickly after I got there, he started to intimidate me with things that he could see, right, that were wrong about me. And within a few minutes, I could feel this is wrong. Something's very wrong here. And I raised my voice, told him he had no right to tell me this and that I was leaving right now and exit stage left.
I am clapping, my friend. That is awesome.
Yeah, but
most people will not do that, particularly young people. They won't because we're conditioned about authority, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very good, right? But we're conditioned. And that's where those people have the upper hand. And particularly in something as intimate and vulnerable of doing a psychic reading, right?
Where they can make stuff up. And
right.
Yeah. But I knew enough and I was intuitive enough to know that somebody shouldn't be doing that to me if they were going to at all be a teacher, right? Like that it was so wrong. And yeah, incredible. So that's what you teach, that people just
yes. Yeah. I mean,
become more assertive.
We create the distinction from being passive versus being aggressive to then being assertive. Because, as I was talking before, when those convicted sex offenders were profiling people and the 97% accuracy, they were seeing people that were demonstrating passivity in their body languaging, right? Now, on the other hand, many of us will go to what we think to be aggressive, and we put out this energy, but that's not what we're advocating. We're also not advocating that we walk around life in fear.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's a magnitude as well. What we just want you to be is alert. And we have 3 levels of alertness. We say we should always be, as we're out and about, at what we call yellow alert. So we're just aware of our environment. We're just, we're noticing, et cetera. Orange alert is if you see someone, or even an animal for that matter, that is coming in toward your physical space where, you start to, your spidey senses start tingling a little bit, and does that mean that you execute the most powerful martial art on the planet, which is called Run Fu? Or do you go out to the other side of the street, whatever, getting out of the situation? And then the final is our red alert. And that's where we're confronted. We don't have an exit, but now we have to stand our ground. And there is just a tremendous, I see people go through this course all the time, particularly women who have had difficulties and now they're in there with their daughters. And their daughters get to now see their moms find their power, which is an amazing demonstration. But then the mother gets to see their daughter find their power. And I had one mom a couple of years ago come up to me with tears in her eyes. And she goes, she had shared with me that she had been sexually abused as a teenager. And she goes, that's not going to happen to my daughter. And she just, there's huge emotion coming present for that.
Right. And it's such balance too, because you don't want your children to see danger everywhere. Like
Right.
it's listening to the inside,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Well, I love this line. It's like trust in God, but tie up your camel. Right. Look at life. We have beautiful people. The majority of people are supportive. They're loving. The universe is kind and wants to support us. And we need to be aware of what's going on. And awareness, again, is the first key, because many times if we're just literally aware in the moment, we'll know what to do. It's when we're caught off guard because our minds are someplace else or we're distracted.
Yeah. Beautiful. Very good. So I know you also talk about the 3 C's that you teach.
I do.
Yeah. So would that be a great way to wrap this up?
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like it's very powerful and a great
Yeah,
place
thank you. Thank you for
yeah.
asking. Well, it's interesting that the 3 C's came about. I published my second book back in February called Breaking Through, 3 winning strategies to create breakthrough results in your life, business, and relationship. But where that book came from is I do what I call a corporate board breaking experience workshop. So I go into corporations and I meet with their teams and I teach them how to break a board, all right, martial arts style. But it's not just breaking the piece of wood. What we do is we identify a breakthrough area that they want to have in their life or their business or relationship, and they literally write it on one side of the board. And then on the other side of the board, we do a deep process, and then they write what the limiting belief or limiting beliefs that are holding them back from that. And then I teach them the mechanics of the board break, and then they come up in front of the room and they powerfully state their name. They say, this is my breakthrough and what's been holding me back. Another person is holding the board, and the limiting belief is facing the board breaker. So now they're looking at it, and then they break the board. So I've been doing this workshop for years. People have really loved it. I get great feedback. I see people that have done the seminar in the past, particularly here in the Denver area. I bump into them. They say, oh my gosh, it was so great. That board is still sitting in my office. I look at it every day. So I was like, okay, well, that's good. That's great. I'm glad they had this great experience, but did they ever have their breakthrough? And so I thought, man, maybe they didn't. Maybe they just had this fun time breaking a piece of wood. So I created this book to say, if I was coaching them, what would the steps be for them to, be able to have their breakthrough? So I'm going to do my little cheat sheet here and look on the back of the book. So the first thing is what I call clarifying your vision. And everybody says, oh, you need to have a vision before you start. And I totally agree with that as well. But through my experience as a coach, what I found is that most people have a very difficult time clearly stating the vision for what they want to create. What they're very good at, Jane, is they're very good at talking about what they don't want in their life, what they're unhappy about, what's not working well. So within this section of the book's broken up into 3 sections. The clarify your vision takes them through a process of identifying the things that you're not working well and the way you want them to, and transforming them into what your powerful vision is. And, some of that is just getting super clear about what you really want. There's another section there about getting clear about their why. Like, why is that important for them to do? And so that's the first C. The second C is where I think many of us, this is where we fall short. And because we had this big idea, we had this dream, but a dream without action is, it's just a wish. So the second C is creating your plan. And when I talk to people about creating a plan, it's not just, oh, I think I'll do this one day. I think I'll do that one day. No, what are the key steps you're going to do? Start with the big picture in mind, break it down into small chunks, and literally put it into your calendar. These are the things I'm going to be doing each and every day and each and every week, et cetera. Because that small, consistent action over time leads to massive results. So that's the second C, which is creating that plan. And part of that, and I've alluded to it before, is to find someone that will hold you capable, Is it a coach? Is it a friend? Is it a parent? Is it a spouse that can check in with you on a weekly basis that you need to be, you need to be witness, they're going to be witness to you and they're holding you capable. And then the final one is taking consistent action. It's just like, I said before, a black belt is a white belt that never quit. What are the small actions you can take each and every day to make this part of your reality? And then know that sometimes you're going to be off, but you might miss one day, but just don't miss two. You know what I'm saying? It's like you keep that commitment to self. And that's when breakthroughs happen. I was talking with one of my coaches last night about something I'm personally working on. And he said, Chris, this isn't about the big thing that's going to happen to you. I think it's the feather on the bowling ball that's going to finally get it to roll. It's this accumulative effort. You're ready to have this breakthrough yourself, but it's not this huge act. It's just that next one. And so I think that we oftentimes think, at least here in the States, we got to take massive action. And I think that's important at times. But the people that I've seen really show success and happiness, they just have consistent practices. So those are the 3 C's.
Wonderful. I love it. That's beautiful. And how do people find more of you if they wanted to, or find more of the 3 C's? Or
Absolutely. Well, certainly the book Breaking Through is available on Amazon. But if they want to reach me directly, they can just go to my website, chrisnatzke.com. That's CHRIS, N as in Navy, ATZ as in zebra, KE.com. And they can read about my speaking programs, my coaching programs, et cetera. Also, as a little special offer, when they go to the top of the site, they'll see if they don't want to buy the book, they're just curious about it, they can literally download the introductory chapter of Breaking Through, and it's right at the top of the website. So all they need to do is provide their name and email address, and they'll automatically be sent the introductory chapter of Breaking Through.
Perfect. So if we put your website in the show notes, they'll be able to find it easily.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed having you.
Thanks so much, Jane. It was a pleasure for me as well. Thank you.
And for everyone out there, don't forget, don't give away your power to anyone else. Be the creator of your own life. Spiral up, spiral out.